Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today I wanted to talk about director's cuts of films because we've had a lot of cuts that have been demanded by fans lately. Obviously, the Snyder Cut is a very big one. That's still going on, even though Justice League came out over 2 years ago. And I think yeah, it's almost 2.5 years now because it came out in November 2017. Um, so that's still going on. In addition, there's also a Cats Release the Butthole cut. That I think that's more just a 4chan troll thing, but apparently that exists. As well as the JJ cut of Rise of Skywalker, which people think is better than the version that we probably got. Um, Now, here's the thing. I have a mixed opinion on director's cuts or alternate cuts of film in general. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it legitimately works. You can look at stuff like Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven. The director's cut of that is completely different than the theatrical cut of it. And there's various other ones too that have kind of popped up over the years. You know, the ones that are kind of a bit more obscure, like the original cut of the first Star Wars film that supposedly George Lucas screened for a bunch of his friends before Marshall Lucas re-edited it, and it was the version we got in theaters. Now, supposedly that version was a lot longer. We've seen bits and pieces of the dialogue from that version in screen tests and stuff from Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford. So basically, Marshall Lucas kind of cut a lot of the fat out of that. And the thing is, I really wouldn't want to see that cut in terms of, well, in terms of seeing it as a superior version to the one we got in films, because basically everybody said that that thing was unwatchable. Even Spielberg, I think at the time, was saying that the thing's unwatchable. It's going to bomb in theaters. So I don't necessarily would want to see it out of hopes that it would be better than the original. I would want to see it maybe out of like, oh, like, you know, what did she actually do in terms of going from Lucas's original cut to the cut that we got in theaters? I'm more just a morbid curiosity. Whereas other films, I think they would probably be superior to the versions we got in theaters. You know, you can look at Justice League. I think the Snyder cut would probably be superior to the Whedon version, and Joss Whedon is still trolling people on Twitter because obviously he's probably stuck at home with nothing better to do. But or maybe he's just writing more failed television pilots. But the thing is, with different cuts of the films, you know, everybody seems to have this idea that director's cuts are superior, or a lot of people do. I shouldn't say everybody. I don't necessarily think that's the case, and I'm going to use Blade Runner as an example. I love the theatrical cut of Blade Runner. I have a couple different cuts of it. I have the theatrical cut, and I also have the final cut. Now, the final cut edits out something that I actually find and this is just me. A lot of people hate this part of the original Blade Runner. It cuts out the monologues by Harrison Ford that go over portions of the film at the beginning, mainly at the beginning and the end. And I don't really enjoy the final cut as much because it doesn't have those. It cuts those out. And the reason why it cuts those out is because at the time, Ridley Scott wanted to do that to kind of mirror some, the 1940s noir type of detective things, because that's really what Blade Runner is. It's a noir film, but it's set in a science fiction universe. So Harrison Ford did not like the idea of doing those monologues. He fought it tooth and nail, but in the end, Ridley Scott got him to do it. As a direct result of that, and some other on-set clashes, Scott and Harrison Ford never really worked again ever, which is sad because I really do love Blade Runner. But the thing is that it edited those out, and I think it takes away from the aesthetic of the story. and I don't think it takes away from the story as a whole. You know, the story still obviously works without the monologues, but I think it's more interesting because Harrison Ford really doesn't have a ton of lines in the film. A lot of it is very wide shots and these kind of um, stylized type of shots. They have a lot of that jazz music going over it, which again kind of dates back to that 40s and 50s type of noir film. Um, so I really still do enjoy the film, no matter what cut they give it, as long as it's not something horribly drastic. Um, but I do like the version with the voiceovers more. So it's really tomato tomato. It's kind of like what would you prefer? And in terms of watching a director's cut, you know, look at Batman v Superman. The ultimate cut of that film, which I would consider the director's cut from Zack Snyder, is far, far, far superior to the theatrical version because it actually adds in parts of it that clear up a lot of plot holes. Like the whole thing in the desert where Superman, you know, they pin all those people getting killed by Superman. In the theatrical cut, they just shoot everybody. You're like, okay, well, Superman doesn't shoot people, so why would they think that Superman did it? But in the ultimate cut, they showed them actually burning the corpses to make it seem like he zinged them all with his laser vision. So that makes sense. But uh, it was cut out for whatever reason because Warner Brothers kind of dictated it. And that's the other thing that a lot of people kind of say is that, you know, the director's cut is the director's original vision for the film. You know, there's always everybody seems to think that there's always a version of a film on the cutting room floor that it was left there that the director actually made. You know, basically what they're talking about is the rough cut of the film for the most part. Before it goes through, you know, a few rounds of editing. Um, and the rough cut of most films does exist in some way, shape, or form. Usually it's in some kind of an archive in a studio. Um, and every once in a while you might see it, you know, leaked out onto the internet or something like that, unless you have an actual finished director's cut. And here's the other thing with director's cuts, is director's cuts are basically, for a while, they were these things that basically it was kind of a way for studios to make a little extra money off of a film that had been out for a while. Again, you look at something like Kingdom of Heaven, which I will say this: watch the director's cut of that film. Don't watch the theatrical cut. If I remember correctly, I think that the director's cut adds in almost an hour of additional footage. So I mean, it is worth it. Um, or you can see like another really really great one is the director's cut of Once Upon a Time in America by Sergio Leone, because the theatrical cut of that film was like an hour and a half, and the director's cut is 4 hours. And if you actually watch the 4 hour director's cut, I honestly think Once Upon a Time in America is on par, is like on the same level as The Godfather, and not just because Robert De Niro is in it. But he does add to it though. But you know, him and James Woods, those two characters in that film are amazing. But you can't trim almost 3 hours out of a film and expect to have a good result in the end when it goes to theaters. And that movie actually, if I remember correctly, that movie bombed in theaters because they cut out so much that the plot was just all over the place. Nobody knew what was going on. Basically because they told Sergio Leone, like, you can't air, you know, a 3 or 4 hour movie in theaters. People won't see it. Again, despite the fact The Godfather, I think, came out not long before that. Maybe 3 or 4 years. So it's one of those things that, like, it's weird that I'm saying this because they always say, oh, it's the director's vision. It's like sometimes the movie you get in theaters is the director's vision. There's not always a secret director's cut with these films. Sometimes it's just, okay, the film was not that great or the film didn't do much. A lot of people try to use that as an excuse as well for, you know, the fact that the film wasn't that good. So maybe we're kind of looking for something, you know, we want the film to be good. We want the film to be good. A lot of people wanted the film to be good. The film wasn't good. So they're looking for kind of ways around that idea. And the one of the ways around that is like, oh, there's got to be a director's cut. There's got to be a secret director's cut. There's got to be stuff that was trimmed out of this that makes it make sense and makes it good. Um, and that, again, that's not always the case. Um, you could look at some other stuff too. Yeah, I don't want to see the original cut of Sonic the Hedgehog. I'd rather see the theatrical cut if I had to watch either one, because I don't want to see photorealistic Sonic, because I don't want nightmares. Um, but that would have been the original director's cut. So it's a little kind of give and take with some of these things. But I want to know what your opinion is. Do you usually hold the opinion that the director's cut is superior to the theatrical cut? What are some of your more favorite director's cuts? And do you think that any of the director's cuts that have been pushed by fans recently are going to be released? Also, the Snyder cut, the JJ cut of Rise of Skywalker, the secret Cats cut, or whatever the hell that is. Again, put your thoughts in the comments below. I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?